Dun, 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 dun. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Welcome. It's Friday night, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and you're at your place for the Unfiltered experience, where we invite you to open up your mind, expand your opportunities, shift your perspectives, and have a truly awesome life. I'm Christopher Rausch, your host, the No Excuses coach, rocking my Guns N' Roses shirt tonight. Normally, I don't wear shirts with logos on them, but I decided I was already out today, and I'm going to wear my Guns N' Roses shirt. So consider this a special episode. And not only is this a special episode because I wore a different shirt. Yeah, you guys put that in your Hall of Fame shit. Tonight, we have a special guest host because, as you know, where's Scott? Well, Scott is playing with tigers in Tanzania. So I don't know who's getting the better deal. If I get to have the better deal doing the show with my co-host, which I'm going to introduce in just a second, or if he is in Tanzania having the great experience with the tigers, who has it better. So we wish Scott the best. Thank you, Scott, for allowing us to have this opportunity to have a guest host tonight. And with that, I am going to introduce, you guys might know her as Mary Kay, the beautiful redhead, wonderful woman who's out there, amazing people with her career coach advice and just supporting everybody. She's got a show with her buddy Scott called All In or Nothing. I'll have her explain that because I just totally butchered it. But please welcome Miss Mary Kay. What's going on, Mary Kay?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm rocking and rolling. I'm hyped up. I'm excited for this conversation. And I screwed up the name of the podcast. What's the name of the podcast with you and Scott?
The name of the podcast is The Life Between All or Nothing.
That's what I had, like 3 different podcast names in my head. And I just watched the episode you guys did last night with our brother Walt McKinley and his wife Stephanie. That was a phenomenal conversation.
That was so exciting. I was so emotional. I was trying to not be emotional. And with those two, it's pretty hard. Yeah. But they were amazing. They were just amazing people.
Yeah, I thought she did a great job for somebody who didn't even want to go on Clubhouse without a camera on. And there she's on camera. Now they're going to do their own podcast called the Warrior Podcast. So we're all about supporting our family up in here at the Unfiltered Experience. We got Ron in the house. I'm not used to seeing Ronald, but what's up, Ron? He says, Chris, my brother. Ronald. And he says, Mary Kay is in the house. Yes, we're all 3 of us plus Lee Height are in a book club together. We meet every Monday.
Happy birthday in advance to Ron. His birthday's tomorrow.
Ron's birthday's tomorrow. Birthday. He's going to be 21 over again.
Yeah, that's right.
He's going to go do it up right. If I was up in Canada, I'd take him to a bar and buy him a few drinks and then get him in trouble.
You need to come to Canada, Chris.
I will give me a speaking gig. I'll come up there in 2 seconds.
Okay, we'll work on that.
See, book me and then I'll come up there and I'll speak and then I'll hang out with you guys and we'll go do something for the homeless or something.
Yeah. Sounds good. Deal.
So before we get started, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to let you know about an amazing organization called Help Heal Humanity, helphealhumanity.org for you guys listening on the podcast. It is a phenomenal organization that is all about helping to heal humanity, as the name implies. I've been on the board of directors now for 3 years, and it's phenomenal. And the reason why I joined is I got the opportunity to interview the CEO and the founder, Serena Buffalino, who's been on this show a couple of times. She's been on my Raw Unscripted show a couple of times. And she was so inspired by my story and inspired by the fact that I was inspired by her story. She invited me to be on the board of directors and just getting on the inside look of what this organization does, the fact that nobody takes a paycheck. All of the money goes directly towards the expenses and what it is that we're doing to raise awareness to help heal humanity, whether it's building a school in Haiti or feeding the homeless in Canada or doing things here in the United States. For you guys watching and listening to this, when you get value out of this particular episode, and I'm sure you will, I want you to take notes. When you get value out of this, do what you can to help heal humanity. Go to helphealhumanity.org, make a donation, whether it's $20, $25, $100, sponsor a child, whatever it is you possibly can do. And then send me a picture of it and just let me know that you did that so I can personally thank you. And for those of you who donate $200 or more, you get an hour of my coaching absolutely free. So you get a tax deductible donation. You help feed many, many, many people with $200. And you get an opportunity to hang out with the No Excuses coach for an hour and get your year started off right. So thank you guys for doing that. Go check it out, helphealhumanity.org. You can go in there and see the volunteer tab. We have open positions on the board and within the organization that we're hiring for. We're expanding. And if you guys find a heart in your soul that you would like to give back and you feel that you want to take my advice, go check out the website, see what it is all about, and then let me know if you have any questions. But we'd love to have you on there because we want to continue to help heal humanity. Thank you for that. And with that, Miss Ashley or Miss Mary Kay, God, I've got 3 different names. I have one Ashley who's got a Mary Kay.
She didn't call me Scott.
All right, Scott, my brother Scott. Tonight we have another phenomenal guest for you. And if you guys have made any types of declarations or resolutions or promises to yourself to take better care of yourself and to take better care of the food that you're putting into your body and the way you're taking care of your health and your exercise and everything else, you're going to want to take notes on this because tonight we have expert Mr. Jeff Ash. Jeff, welcome to the show, brother. The Unfiltered Experience.
Thanks for having me on.
You are most welcome. It's you and I met doing a I think it was doing something for the Three Hearts organization, right?
Mental Health Warriors.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep meeting people all over the place. Yeah, we were doing something with Adam Duvall.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I got to remember all these different things because I'm meeting people from all over the world.
Me too.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here. And one of the first questions I really have for you is I noticed that your website is called Hope Drives. Hope Drives Me. What inspired you to name that, where normally people are naming their websites after themselves?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because that one, that name my wife came up with, she still gives me a hard time because she was planning to do something with it, but she never did. And I just sort of stole it and have gone with it. But you know, she likes to tease me about that. But it really came out of her experience dealing with chronic medical issues. So she has a chronic brain condition called idiopathic intracranial hypertension, where she gets too much spinal fluid pressure built up in her brain. And it can cause like vision loss and different things like that. In fact, last night she lost her vision for a little while, but it's something we've been dealing with since about a month after we got married back in 2012. And so, so that's been one of those things. She also has lupus and some other ongoing chronic things that basically impacts every aspect of her life and our life and that kind of thing. And so the Hope Drives Me came out of that. It's that hope is what keeps driving us forward to stay together, to get through life, to enjoy life, to find, those things that bring us both joy and fulfillment and that kind of thing. So that's where the name came from. And it really just fit perfectly with the coaching style that I use.
Yeah. Nice. So when you think about that, and so hope must drive you, what is your origin story in all of this, Jeff? Because I'm sure maybe something happened in your previous life. I've had other guests on the show similar to your expertise, and I found out that they were formerly obese, they were formerly out of shape, and they got serious about their health. They got a cancer diagnosis or something like that. So talk to us about your origin story and what got you to be the health expert that you are today.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always been active and involved in sports. I played baseball in high school and growing up, and pretty much ran around doing something active my entire childhood. And then I got into rock climbing in my teen years and did some competitive rock climbing, late teens, early 20s, that kind of thing. Worked as a climbing guide, all of that stuff. And then got married and stepped away from climbing. But of course, throughout my adult life, I've been getting back into various things. And so, I got into karate when my kids were studying karate and thought, oh, that'd be fun. And then of course, whenever I get involved in anything, I have to join competitions because I just love competing. so I competed in karate and won, 3 national championship things at my level and that kind of thing. And so I've always enjoyed doing that stuff. And then got away from karate. Well, in 2010, my first wife passed away of cancer that we didn't know about. And so through that process, I ended up, I remarried my wife now, and we moved away from where I was living. And so I got away from karate then, and then ended up just kind of getting into cycling and weightlifting, weight training, that kind of thing in the gym. So the typical gym things. And I got into doing some bodybuilding stuff and some transformation challenges, the bodybuilding.com thing where you do your 12-week thing, before and after pictures. And it got me really interested in learning much more about the nutrition science and all of that. And so I started, I got my personal training certification, started working with clients, got a qualification as a nutritionist through MNU located in the UK. And then have gone on and got my certification as an intuitive eating coach. So been doing that for the last few years. And so I kind of started off in the whole, like with that bodybuilding approach, typical approach to fitness, where it was about focusing on building muscle, getting lean, that kind of thing. But as I went through and saw, a lot of how my wife was dealing with things, the struggles she was going through, other normal people who just are trying to be healthy and active and enjoy life, then I really started transitioning more into the area I'm in now, which is intuitive eating and what we call a weight neutral approach to health.
Love it. Mary Kay?
Weight neutral. So
yeah,
you knew I wanted to ask something.
I knew. I could see it in your mind. You were getting fidgety.
I heard intuitive eating.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain to us what is intuitive eating?
Yeah, well, let me ask you this: what do you think it is? You've probably heard it in fitness circles, or maybe you've heard it thrown around. Do either of you guys have any ideas at all?
I can guess. So I can guess
Okay.
just
Okay.
thinking about it.
You guess, and
Yeah.
you'll probably get it right.
So I feel like cucumbers. I feel like cheese. Like that. That's the only way I can think of.
Okay.
Yeah, eating what I feel like eating, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sort of. Yeah.
That's the same thing I was going to say, is like intuitively, I know that I should be eating these things, and intuitively, I know that those will be good for my body. You know, I my pleasure center says I want chocolate, but my intuitive self says, you know, to have something maybe with some sugar-free candy or some sugar-free pie or something like that. So intuitively, we kind of know what what we need, but it's the short-term gratification that often screws us up. But now
Okay.
we want
Yeah. I mean,
real definition.
yeah, it's an interesting thing, and that's a fairly common assumption when you hear the word, and it kind of makes sense, you know, because you're taking the words intuitive and eating and sort of putting together what those words would mean in the definition. But there's actually a framework. It's a self-care eating framework that integrates instinct, emotion, and rational thought. And it's designed to help people transform their relationship with food and their body without any kind of restriction, guilt, or shame. So it's sort of like what you said, where you're eating what your body seems to be directing you toward. But at the same time, a lot of, you know, kind of how you said, well, I know I should be eating this, so I should eat this instead of the cookies. That's where that restriction and the guilt and stuff, I think, for a lot of people comes in, and why a lot of people struggle with their relationship with food, because whenever they do eat the cookie, they don't just eat it and enjoy it like, oh man, that was a delicious cookie. Man, I really enjoyed that, and then move along their day. But they eat that cookie, and they're like, oh, I can't believe I went off my diet. It wasn't my cheat day. And
you're inside my head right now.
And they just feel bad, and they're like, okay, well, it's Friday, the weekend's coming up. I already blew my diet. Screw it. I'll get back on track Monday. And so then what do you do over the weekend? You just you eat all the cookies. You're like burgers, pizza, everything.
Yeah.
And then Monday you're like, ugh. And then you get on the scale. The scale's up 5, 10, whatever pounds. And you know that you didn't gain that much body fat, but you get on there and you see it. And then you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm eating super light today. I'm skipping lunch. I'm doing this, you know, whatever. And you do this all week, but then you find yourself super hungry at the end of the day, later in the week, because you haven't been eating enough. And then you have these cravings. And you're like, oh, man, I shouldn't be eating this. And then you eat it, and then that guilt and shame. So it's like this binge restrict cycle. And some people, it's not really an official binge eating episode, which would be like massive food in a very short period of time, but that overeating, and then that feeling bad about it. And some people may just feel bad and frustrated. Some people literally beat themselves up over it and go into a full-on downward spiral. And that's not uncommon at all. And so anyway, so intuitive eating is a framework that's actually designed specifically to address this particular kind of a thing. And it's made up of 10 different principles, actually. So
wow. Thank you for sharing that. So when you got started in all of this, what were some common things that you thought were smart things to do, but you found out they were actually incorrect? Because there's so many different things out there, like, you know, fasting or not fasting, you know, don't eat eggs, eat eggs, you know, the Mediterranean diet, no, all beef. Or I've got friends that are carnivores and they swear by it. Chris, you got to do a carnivore diet. What was it for you that you thought, okay, I'm going to do this in order to win these competitions? But as you started getting into your research and trying things for yourself, what were some things you were like, oh, that's actually not the case?
Yeah, it's really the one size fits all approach that a lot of these say. So carnivore proponents, hardcore ones, will say carnivore is the way to go. Intermittent fasting, they're like, intermittent fasting is what you got to do. It's going to increase your longevity. It's going to improve your blood glucose. It's going to do all these things. Every diet has these promises of what it can give you, but they're all very restrictive. And so when a person can't adhere to the diet, then they're blamed for it. So the person, and what we see, and you guys may have experienced this yourself. How many diets have you been on over the course of your adult life? You're on the diet. Hey, it works. 12 weeks later, you lost weight. Great. But then it comes right back on. Or over the course of the year, it comes right back on. And in most cases, when people are doing that, especially the research shows, especially when people don't have a huge amount of weight to lose, but then they start dieting, they actually end up gaining more and more each time. So they diet down and then they gain and go past where they were. And then the next diet is maybe a little harder to lose that weight, but then they end up gaining it back and then some more. And that's what we tend to see. And that's actually one of the dirty little secrets of the fitness industry is fitness professionals know that most people do not maintain the lost weight. More than just, it's not just a 50-50 split. I mean, it's well up above half of all people regain that weight. And depending on the approach, it's even up in, in the 80-90% range that they regain it. So
I've heard.
So intuitive eating and like I mentioned, the weight neutral approach. So weight neutral approach, then instead of saying, I'm struggling with these different health things, I'm struggling with my relationship with food, I feel like my eating is chaotic and out of control. Instead of saying, well, go on a diet, restrict yourself, cut out sugar, cut out this and that, instead of doing the things that tend to drive those disordered eating habits and patterns, what we say is, well, let's figure out what is it that you're struggling with. And so we look at all of the facets of their health, not just the physical. So it's the emotional and psychological and social, economic, even intellectual, all of these different facets, spiritual, all these different facets of health that if you neglect any of them, you're going to suffer. But we get focused on just the physical. And so that's where what should I eat? What should I not eat? How much should I eat? And that, so it's more about how we eat rather than specifically what we eat.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So let me ask you this, Jeff, so it sounds like, do these principles map to the holistic areas that you just mentioned?
Yeah. In fact, I'll just kind of go through them real briefly here, what they are, because it's pretty amazing, because as you start to think about each one just a little bit, you start to see how they build on each other and how they work together. And because some of the principles sound a little wild at first on its own if you just implemented that one principle, but when you build on all 10, then it provides this really great framework for improving your relationship with food and eating in a way that's right for you as an individual, based on your economic status, your social status, what you have going on in your life. If you're a 24-year-old with no responsibilities versus a mom of 6 kids who's also working and that kind of thing. We don't all have the same 24 hours. My 24 hours looks different than yours, that kind of thing. So anyway, the 10 principles, the first one's rejecting the diet mentality. And so essentially that's when I'm working with a client with intuitive eating, we get them to put intentional weight loss on the back burner. So we take the focus off that being the goal. So oftentimes they'll get rid of their scale or put it up in the attic or something, and out of sight, out of mind, because what we find is that when you are in that diet mindset, it interferes with trying to work through the process. If you were trying to deal with some mental health condition and you had this thing that kept interfering with all the work that you were trying to do, well, you're not going to make any progress in that area. So that's kind of that first step. It's not really a step. This is more of a framework that you don't really go through in any particular order, but that's kind of where it starts, is that rejecting the diet mentality, understanding that a lot of the failed attempts at dieting are due to the diets themselves, not not you being good enough, that kind of thing. Because I think we all know people who are incredibly self-disciplined, very strong willpower, CEOs of companies, but they struggle with their weight. And often people give us the idea that, hey, if you're in a bigger body, it's because you lack self-discipline, you have no willpower, you can't control your emotions. And it's like, well, they do that everywhere else. But so what's about food? And so we kind of reject that idea. And that really frees up people then to move through the other principles.
I love that, Jeff. I want to just stop you there before you go to the next one.
Oh yeah.
That's one of the questions that I had for you is, based on my size, there's this chart out there, and I don't know who publishes it, but it's this chart that says if you're 6'1", you should weigh 185 pounds. That for me, that's a bunch of bull. I'm 6'1". If I weighed 185 pounds, I would look anorexic. I mean, I got down to 193 last year when I was doing 75 hard, and I looked sick in the mirror, and I'm like, okay, who made this stuff up? And to your point, like ditching the scale, one of the best things I've found I'm not a dietitian or a health coach, but I've just told people, ditch looking at the friggin' number. How do you feel? How do you feel?
Yeah.
Do you feel good? Do you feel confident? Are you happy with the clothes that you're wearing? Who fucking cares? If you're pulling 160 and you're a woman and you're go for it. You don't need to be a $110. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. So talk to us about that chart, and talk to us about that mentality for us to let go of what we're supposed to weigh as opposed to feeling good. Because I love that approach.
Yeah, well, that's the BMI, the body mass index, and it's based. What's interesting is the BMI, which is what insurance companies use to determine whether they're going to give you the premium rate for life insurance.
30% body fat or something like that. I'm like, I'm muscle.
Yeah,
baby.
I mean, you can have shredded abs, and they'll say you're too big, and they'll give you a more expensive rate on your BMI. Other people, who are in bigger bodies are often full on denied life insurance, even though all of their health markers are perfectly fine. There's a lot of people who literally cannot get life insurance. There's also people who can't get adequate health insurance because of their BMI. And that's one of the problems with BMI. And part of the rejecting the diet mentality part is that we often in our society look at weight in and of itself as being an indicator of health. So it's not one factor. I mean, we're not saying that it has no impact, but at the same time, so often people who are in bigger bodies, and they will go into a doctor and they'll be told one thing. They go in for allergies, and the doctor starts talking to them about losing weight. And they're like, did I tell you that I want to lose weight? I just came in here for allergies. An example, my late wife, in fact, she had breast cancer, and then she got through that. And then she went through about an 18-month period where she lost a bunch of weight. She started working out and changing her eating habits and all kinds of things like that. But she's still very much in a bigger body. And she went to the doctor because she'd been throwing up after her workouts and kind of feeling some anxiety and pain in her chest and stuff. But then it would clear up and she'd be fine. And so she went into the doctor and told him, I've been doing this and going to the gym and stuff. He's all, well, keep that up. It sounds like anxiety. So he gave her Xanax. And about a week.
Of course, fucking script.
Well, she's, fat lady comes in. She's been working out, getting sick. Okay, makes sense. She was, just that mentality. And it's so prevalent in the research on this is actually pretty staggering, the bias that's in the medical field toward people in bigger bodies. But, she goes in there and gets Xanax, and then 2 weeks later drops dead. She actually had a fist-sized tumor in her chest.
Oh my God.
And so, these are the kinds of things, and you hear stories like this all the time from people who they can't get a hip replacement because their BMI is too high. They're told they have to lose weight to get to a certain BMI before they will get the surgery and those kinds of things. So that whole BMI thing, what's interesting is the BMI thing was a mathematician who created it.
Oh,
and
Jesus Christ.
it was based on white European male body types. That's specifically what it's from. He was basically, and it wasn't designed to be used for individual health purposes. It was to see what's the average European white male, what's the average size based on height.
Can we update that thing?
And so now we apply that to women. We apply it to non-white men. We apply, all over. And then we say, oh, well, you're too big. And it's like, they're not even the same ethnicity. And there's so many differences between Black people and Native Americans and white, European bodies and South Pacific and all of those things. So anyway, that's my rant on BMI.
So I have another one. You just spurred in my brain. Sorry, Mary Kay. So you just spawned something when you said bigger body. And I love the way that you accentuate that. There's different types of body. There's 3 different body types. There's ectomorph, mesomorph. I can't remember is there something to that when somebody says I'm big boned? I mean, like people say, I'm a bigger dude, but I can get down to 193. There's not a reason why I can. My bones don't really have any role in that necessarily. But talk to us about those 3 different body types. And is that something you subscribe to as far as somebody being able to say, okay, listen, I'm an ectomorph or I'm a mesomorph or something like that, to be able to understand and not be so down on themselves if they're not, a size 2?
Yeah, I don't like those 3 body types in particular, but I think it does illustrate a little bit of what we do have differences. And so, the endomorph, ectomorph, mesomorph, and the mesomorph is kind of what we picture the superhero as. That's what a lot of guys aspire to be. That's a kind of muscular V shape, not too big, not too skinny, just right in the middle. And so many guys, there's what they call it, mesomorphic, something. I lost the term now, but there's actually research using that. And it's really fascinating on the body. Hey, I was like,
we have my associate producer just got home from school.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Oh, the boss
here on the show. My son Jackson. I'm actually doing a show right now, buddy. You say hi to everybody?
I'm in a different room than I normally am in. Hello. I am in a different room. I had to move stuff because my 25-year-old daughter is in her room, which is next to my office, and she's a big D&D player. And she plays on Friday nights at the same time. And they were all former theater kids, and they like act out in person, and it's loud and screaming. And it's pretty fun.
Nice.
This is all virtual, and they're still like hooping and hollering.
I love it. I love it.
All right, buddy. I'm going to go downstairs, and I'll be down there in a little bit. I love you.
Aww.
My Bubba. My Bubba. Yep. I don't even worry about it. Say goodbye. Have a great show.
Bye.
Bye, Jackson.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. I love you. I'll see you downstairs.
Oh, what a cutie.
He is amazing. He's my why. He is my why. That and making this world a better place for who I am and what I do. Thank you, buddy. I love you. Thank you. Sorry about that,
Very
Jeff.
cool. No, I love
always
those.
let him do it.
Those
I don't tell him
fun.
not to do it because I'm like, I don't care if it's live. It's it's what's supposed to happen.
That's more important. So so the body types, I mean, there's something to that because there are people who have bigger bones, shorter torsos, longer legs, denser bones, a propensity for higher muscle mass distribution, higher propensity for fat. Some you see it with women a lot. Some just gain the fat in their hips and their thighs. Others gain it up top. You hear women in fitness groups all the time talking about how, hey, I lost 20 pounds, but it all came from my breasts, and they're mad because that's the only place that they get left. So you have all these differences. I mean, I always use, since I work mainly with men, I always use the illustration of NFL players. I mean, just look at the makeup of that and try and tell me that we can all get the same body type. I mean, you look at those linemen and wide receivers. Zach Martin and CeeDee Lamb. I'm a Cowboy fan. The two of them, they could not switch places. There's just no way. They're just, their body is different. And so, we see that, but we see it with just the average people. So it's part of that rejecting the diet mentality is accepting the fact that we all have this genetic blueprint that does drive and dictate so much about our body size and shape. And it does actually, the research in the area of obesity, we're finding more and more that it is driven much more by genetics than people realize. Ooh. And so it's really fascinating how that works. Of course, it's within the context of all those other areas of health that I talked about. So in the context of our food environment, your socioeconomic status, all of those things factor in conjunction with your genetics to kind of drive you toward these different body sizes. But again, it comes back to, that's why we shouldn't be stigmatizing or shaming people when they're in these body sizes. I mean, we shouldn't do that anyway, but
yes.
But yeah.
Love it. So tip number 2, or I think we were on principle number
2.
Yes. So that was the one. That was the reject the diet mentality one.
Talk about it.
Yeah. So the next one is honoring your hunger. This one I like a lot because it just makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the focuses with intuitive eating is eating enough. So dieting is don't eat too much. And often, and a lot of these diets, and they'll straight up tell you, I mean, a lot of coaches, they're like, eat as little as you can tolerate and muscle through. And that's where you should be eating. Wow. When intuitive eating is rather focusing on prioritizing, nourishing your body, feeding yourself, eating enough. And we do that because we have these hunger signals. I mean, they're biological drives that are built into our body by design to keep us alive. And so when we get a hunger signal, it's not a bad thing, like dieting would often try and convince us to ignore, suppress, little tricks to get around it, that kind of thing. But we honor it. So, hey, I'm hungry, I'm going to feed myself. That doesn't just mean that, hey, I'm a little hungry right now, so I'm going to go grab something to eat. It just means in general, we're honoring our hunger. So often I'll have people set up kind of a structure to their day that helps them to feed themselves well. And, they'll eat breakfast and they'll eat when they're hungry then at breakfast until they are. One of the other principles is feel your fullness. So it's not just honor your hunger. You got the other end of the spectrum, which is feel your fullness. So you learn to reconnect with your hunger and fullness cues. And that's a big part of intuitive eating, is learning to recognize those things so that when you do sit down to eat, you arrive at a meal with a moderate level of hunger so that you're not starving, but so you're hungry enough that you can enjoy it. You're ready to eat. Right. And then you connect with your body and sense when, hey, I've had enough to eat. I don't need to eat anymore. I know that I get to eat till fullness at my next meal or snack. So I don't need to stress about it. I can stop comfortably and move on. And so that's one of the other principles. So honoring your hunger and feeling your fullness.
I love that. So when you think about honoring your hunger and feeling your fullness, I know one thing for me that really helped out is you get hungry and you're like, rah, 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 and you eat and you're like, oh my God, I ate too much. So one thing I started to do years and years ago is I take a bite of food, I put my fork down and I take a drink of water, whatever I'm drinking. And I kind of give myself time to process that, because they say the thing is like your stomach doesn't tell your brain until 30 minutes after you're full or something. It takes 30 minutes to kind of have that conversation. Is there something to that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Your body, when you take the food in, it has to digest in your stomach starts to break it down, starts that digestive process. Then gastric emptying occurs, where it empties it into your small intestine, where the nutrients are absorbed. And so in that process has to occur for what we call satiety cues to kick in. And so fullness is that feeling, that physical feeling that you're full. You've got, your stomach is stretching. And interestingly enough, there's hunger hormones. There's one called ghrelin that is released from the stomach, and hormones are basically just chemical messengers. So when you eat, your stomach stretches and expands, because your stomach's real small when it's empty. So it expands, and that shuts off ghrelin. It's like a valve, so to speak. So when it's empty and when you're needing food, this ghrelin hormone is released in your body to tell you, go get food. I need energy soon. When you eat, it stretches, it shuts that off. So that shuts off the hunger drive. But satiety is another signal in the body that you're satisfied, that you're good with the food that you've had. And those are also driven by other hormones like leptin and insulin. Interestingly enough, is a satiety hormone too. When insulin rises, that triggers satiety in your body. And so anyway, that process where you're digesting the food, those hormones don't immediately shoot out as soon as the food hits your stomach. It has to digest before these hormones start doing their job. And so exactly what you said there, slowing down, that's often one thing that we help people do, is slow down their eating, whether that's to take a bite, put your fork down, take a drink, have conversation. Often we recommend people go to a place to eat, like at the table with their family. And this works great for kids too, the same thing. You have the family around and you can have conversation that slows down the eating process. Everybody can enjoy that. And often at first, we'll have people use something called a hunger and fullness scale to check in with their hunger at the beginning, sort of an exercise to start to reconnect with it. A lot of people literally they know when they're absolutely starving and they know when they're painfully full, but they don't know anything else in between. Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah. So, you can, the hunger and fullness scale can be really, really helpful for that. In fact, I just did an episode of my podcast on that exact thing. So you might want to check that out if somebody's listening and has heard that, the Men's Intuition podcast. I have an episode where I talk about the hunger and fullness and using that hunger scale. But yeah, when you connect, then you can check in with yourself in the middle of the meal. You stop, you mindfully say, okay, where am I at now? How full am I? You're like, you know what? I think I can eat another plate of food. And that's honoring your hunger. You're not cutting yourself short. You're not saying, I'm going to only eat on small little plates. I'm only going to eat one spoonful. It's saying, okay, I'm going to honor my hunger, but at the same time, stop when I'm full. So, and then that takes us to another principle. This one, this is one of the scary ones. This one's called make peace with food. That's not the scary part. The scary part is unconditional permission to eat.
Ooh,
and that's exactly what
that's scary.
Twinkies and Jack Daniels for breakfast.
Anything, any food, any amount. at any time. And so that means, but that doesn't mean that you're going to just eat cookies and donuts and pizza and drink beer. Because, it's still within the context of honoring your hunger, feeling your fullness, that kind of thing, and some of the other principles later. So that unconditional permission to eat is actually a key factor in it, because it goes back to what you were talking about earlier with the cookie. I know I should be eating celery and kale, but I really want the cookie, but I can't eat the cookie right now. I'll go ahead and eat this. And then you eat that, and then you eat the cookie and you feel bad about it because you weren't supposed to do that. But if you had unconditional permission to eat the cookie, you'll eat the cookie and then just move on. And often what people do too, and this is, either of you guys ever had Halo Top ice cream or anything like that?
Doesn't sound familiar.
No.
Okay, it's like a super low calorie. Yeah, it's a super low calorie sort of fake ice cream thing that costs 3 times as much as real ice cream, but it's only like 150 calories for a pint or something, something like that. But a lot of people use it for dieting. But what happens is when you start trying to eat these diety foods or super low, like if you try and do spaghetti squash instead of real pasta, unless you like spaghetti squash.
I do.
Yeah. And if you like it, cool. But if you're wanting pasta and you try and say, oh, well, this will work. It's like, no, it doesn't work. So what you find is that you tend to gravitate toward that other thing anyway, but then you feel bad for eating the thing you really wanted. So that's where that unconditional permission to eat comes in. It's that you're free to do it. Just because you're free to do it doesn't mean you're going to do it.
Well, one of my problems is the fact that I'm eating really good now. I go through phases where I'm like really good. Summertime, I'm a little bit bad, and I allow myself that. It's worked for me all my life. But my wife just recently got me a bunch of healthy sweets, like Atkins bars and stuff like that. She goes, there's no sugar in it, because I told myself no sugar, no white sugar. I can have fruit and stuff like that, not in overabundance. But what I find myself doing is like my brain will say, oh, these are healthy. Yeah. And instead of having 1, I'll have 3. And then I'll start breaking down the ingredients on there. I'm like, oh, fuck. Really? I thought these were healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're like, I could have just had the Snickers that I wanted, and it was and it probably would have been 2/3 the calories of these 4 bars that I ate. If you're, if you're still caught up and if you're still thinking in terms of calorie content. And so with intuitive eating, we don't. But, if you're thinking that, it's interesting how these little tricks often backfire, because it just eat the candy bar and then you'll be satisfied with it and you move on, instead of eating 400 calorie snack packs that all taste sort of mediocre. And so that's part of that. Yeah, that's really what drives a lot of the issues that people have, is this deprivation when we're depriving ourselves, and it's backed up by tons of research. I mean, even the intuitive eating framework itself is supported by over 200 different studies that have looked at different aspects of it, whether it be for your relationship with food, psychological correlates of health, mood. And what's interesting is that, and we haven't even gone through all the principles yet, but this unconditional permission to eat is actually something that drives a lot of beneficial effects psychologically for a lot of people. And also when you're people who score high on these intuitive eating assessment scales that they use in research to look at how much of a intuitive eater are you, they actually tend to have a much more nutritionally adequate diet overall anyway. So instead of forcing yourself, like you have to eat this way, you can't eat that, but we get the freedom to eat in a way that feels right for us, it fits within our culture, our preferences, listening to our body, we end up eating a very nutritionally dense diet anyway. And so it's really fascinating how that works.
I love that. I want to grab Joe's a couple questions for you, just in between the principles. So Joe says here, I work shift work and I try to eat healthy, but I find myself with fatigue. Can you provide some recommendations on foods that can help with energy? Great question, Joe. Thank you for being here, buddy.
Great question.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really great question. I actually have a good friend who's located in Australia who has a wonderful podcast called The Habit. Sorry, not The Habit.
The Habit?
Oh my gosh, what healthy? Okay, A Healthy Shift. Okay. So look up that podcast, A Healthy Shift. His name's Roger Sutherland. He is he's been doing 24/7 shift work for 35 years, and he's also a nutritionist as well. We went through the same program, different times, but same program. he's amazing with this stuff. He loves the topic of shift work and chrononutrition, like nutrition timing of things. Look him up. You'll get all the info you need. But the gist of it is I would, if somebody came to me asking about that, we'd look at a number of different things. One would be, are you eating carbs? A lot of people are trying to go low carb because, well, that's quote healthy. That's what all the gurus are saying. The problem is carbs are your body's preferred fuel source. And so if you're cutting back on those too much, then you're going to feel that. Also, eating enough is another one. One of the other common things with shift workers is that they tend to skip meals or go extremely long periods of time without eating. And so when you do that, you're going to run out of energy. And so prioritizing, so rather than focusing so much on what to eat, I would focus first on how you're eating. So try and fit in a schedule and the snack. That means that if all you can eat is a candy bar, and you're thinking, well, I shouldn't eat a candy bar because that's not healthy, but it's food, it's energy for you.
Yeah.
A candy bar is better than not eating anything. So while maybe a banana and a grilled chicken salad might be quote ideal, a candy bar and a Coke is at least something for you. And in fact, I can share a little story from my wife. She went for months where she could hardly keep anything down because she was having some major GI issues. And I said, eat some candy. You're keeping that down. And she's like, wow, that's so much candy and sugar. And I said, but it's something. It's energy. You're not keeping any, you're going to starve if you don't at least eat something. So, so, obviously you don't, if you can get some things like your protein and fat and carbs and fiber in there, then you want to find ways to do that. But yeah, I often recommend people just have some of those quick snacks handy so they can do that. But then also sleep. I mean, sleep deprivation is such a big thing. Some people think it's all about the food, and really there's things like sleep, stress reduction.
Yeah.
I remember one of my instructors said, if you're a shift worker, find another job. That's the best advice I can give you. Obviously, that's
Joe.
We don't want our
we get the fuck
there
out
you
of
go.
Yep. We don't want our shift workers quitting, our first responders. But I mean, it really is. It's a serious thing. But if you can prioritize it, check out Roger's stuff, man. He is amazing. And actually, if you need a one-on-one work with somebody, he will do a fantastic job with you.
Awesome. What was the name of his podcast again?
A Healthy Shift.
A Healthy Shift. Awesome. There you go, Joe.
It's all about shift work.
Joe.
Yep.
Appreciate that. Actually, we've got another question before we go on, just to make sure we get these in case people have to bail off. Anya says, what do you think about the Ozempic? I think it's the Ozempic injection. A lot of famous people are using it, sending the wrong message to the youngest to be skinny. I know for a fact, actually, I'll share this. My wife started on that, and I think she went to Wegovy, and she's on something else. She was a big body person, if you will. And she's lost like 70 pounds, which has been pretty incredible because she's one of those people that would bust her ass. She's got Hashimoto's and thyroid issues. I would watch her literally bust her ass, and like the less calories, more calories burned and less calories in. That did not work for her. This is the one thing that has worked for her. So to Anya's question, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I'll tell you, most of the people in the intuitive eating space are very, very opposed to it because a lot of the work that we do in this is equal treatment and destigmatization of larger bodies, and so often people, the idea that there's a drug to make me skinny, that can really be stigmatizing toward a lot of people in larger bodies. It's like, hey, our goal is to eradicate fat people. And so, and I use the term fat. That's how a lot of people are using that. They're sort of reclaiming that word now to describe as a descriptor. But in any case, my take on it is, again, one of the things, it certainly does impact your appetite, and that's how it works. Basically, your appetite regulation. So you take this medication, but you still have to honor your hunger and feel your fullness and that kind of thing. So if somebody, I was working with somebody that was on it before, and we still focused on the same things. And that's, to me, it's a personal decision if you feel like you need that, and especially if you have diabetes, because it works really well with that. The problem though with it is that long-term effects. I mean, it's been around for a while. We're not 100% sure what it is, but a lot of people are experiencing really negative side effects from it. and it can lead to nutrient deficiencies if you're not eating well enough, if it's impacting your appetite too much. So you have to be careful with that kind of thing. And it's something you have to take forever. That's what a lot of people don't realize too, is that you can't get to your target weight and stop, because your body has this set point where it likes to be, settling point. There's different theories on the exact nature of how that works. But that's a big part of intuitive eating, is this understanding the set point. And so this drug, when you stop taking it, your body may push you back up to that higher weight. And again, right now, I mean, for people taking the legit stuff, if they're not buying it from compounding pharmacies, which are just a little sketchy, I mean, it can cost you $1,000 a month. And
wow.
you might think, okay, I can commit to 6 months of this. But then what happens after that? You go right back up. And the guilt, the shame, the negative body image that happens when you see yourself smaller, and then now you're bigger again, and you look back and you're like, wow, I was there, and look where I let myself get, all this stuff. And it just perpetuates the issues that people struggle with it. So I'm not a big fan of it, but I'm not totally opposed to it, and I'm not a doctor. So I definitely don't advise people not to take it. But at the same time, I think it's,
do your research.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
my take on,
thank you.
on it.
Yeah.
I have a question, Jeff, because you brought up emotions. How does that play a part in your holistic approach, or within your framework? Is there a slot for emotions?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the principles is coping with your emotions with kindness. And so that is where you are, essentially what you're doing is you're saying, with the unconditional permission to eat part. One of the other principles is eating for satisfaction, making that a priority. So making sure that satisfaction is a part of your eating, and that when you're choosing food to eat, because that helps you then to better regulate your intake. When you're satisfied, like I was saying with the candy bar and the 500 calorie snack packs, it helps you to eat in a way that's really more satisfying and enjoyable. But coping with your emotions with kindness is recognizing that food restriction, physically and mentally, can really trigger that loss of control. And often people use the emotion. Well, they use food as a way of coping with emotions. And then they also feel bad about that. And so much of dieting too, diet culture and diet mentality, is that you shouldn't eat emotionally. So you need to stop emotionally eating. You shouldn't eat for emotional reasons. Eat only if you're hungry. Stop when you're 80% full. All these kinds of little tricks, rather than saying, you know what, it's perfectly fine to eat for emotional reasons. We all do. It's part of every culture. It's part of our social gatherings. It's part of what makes life enjoyable, is to eat. It's perfectly fine to sit down at the end of a stressful day with a bowl of ice cream. Yeah. But if that's your only coping mechanism, and not Halo Top, but the actual Ben and Jerry's, Haagen-Dazs, the good stuff. Yeah,
full cream. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so what we help people focus on is that, it's okay if you're using this as a coping mechanism. But what we want to do is, through this process of reconnecting with your body and what your body truly needs, is what are some other ways that we can better cope with a particular situation. So at the end of a day, a stressful day, was a bowl of ice cream a great way to cope with it that day? Sure, that might be. Okay, what if it's every day, or every time that you're stressed, or every time you're upset? It's probably not a good idea. Just like sitting down and having a beer at the end of the day is perfectly fine. But if you're sitting down and drinking a dozen every night just to de-stress, then that's probably a problem. And you really need to look at what it is that you could be doing that would better meet those emotional needs. And so instead of beating yourself up over using food, you say, well, what can I do? What can I add in? And that's a big part of intuitive eating, is this mindset of, instead of taking things away, which is what dieting does, we say, well, what can I add in? So instead of saying, oh, I'm eating too much fast food, well, what can I add in my diet? Or I'm eating too much sugar, well, what can I add in? And instead of saying, what can I take out? And often then what happens is we replace those things with it. And that's kind of what happens with the emotional stuff, is that you start to say, well, why are you so stressed that you feel like you need to bury yourself in a bowl of ice cream every night? Well, it's this and this. Well, what can we do to deal with that, so that you're not
Right.
doing something that's not even effective anyway. And that's the problem, is when we use food as a coping mechanism, as our primary coping mechanism, and we're not actually dealing with the issue, then we never resolve it.
Yeah.
That's so true. I
That
love
makes
what
a
you're
lot of
saying,
sense.
Jeff. Yeah, what you're saying is something I started doing myself last year. Was like I would go to the refrigerator, it'd be like 9 o'clock at night. I'm like, oh, I want some ice cream, or I want a donut or something like that. And I'll be like, I'll tell myself, okay, have a piece of fruit. And if after the piece of fruit, after 15 minutes of eating the piece of fruit, if you still want that, then get that. Usually the piece of fruit satisfies me. And so, I mean, 99% of the time I'm like, God, I'm glad I did that, because I would have went for the bad thing, but I just had a simple piece of fruit and it satiated me. And, I got a little sweetness out of it, so that definitely helped with me. The other thing I have a question for you and I found this, I think when you were talking about intuitive eating, I was kind of like putting it all together. Tell me if this sounds like intuitive for me. Personally, just me. When I read, God, I've been doing a shitty job with people's memories today. The 4-Hour Body. What's the podcaster dude?
4-Hour Body.
Yeah, he did the 4-Hour Work Week. Tim
Ferriss?
Ferriss. Yeah.
Tim Ferriss. So he did the 4-Hour Work Week, and then he did the 4-Hour Body. And essentially out of that, what I got for me personally was when I'm on 5 days, like I'm doing really, really good, fruits, vegetables, protein, and I'm not having any cheat. If I get to Sunday and I eat whatever I want, like a breakfast burrito, and I literally like have all the things that I want, I never gained any weight. But I always had, I always knew that going through the structure part, which I started to enjoy, was I always had in the back of my mind is like, okay, I'm doing this, but I get to celebrate and I get to have this one day where I don't have to think about these things. And it worked for me. I gained muscle. I was totally fine. I never gained weight. I was happy. Is that like intuitive eating as well?
No, that would really be a restriction, because if you think about you've already labeled that day as a cheat day. So you've attached moral value to certain foods.
Gotcha.
So you basically said these foods are bad and I can only have them if I'm cheating on my diet. I can't. And so I'm not saying it doesn't work for some people, because it certainly does. I mean, there are people who do that, and who am I to say that that's disordered or something? I mean, but the problem is that most of us do find that that's actually problematic. And when somebody tells me that, I kind of ask them things like, what happens if you have a package of Oreo cookies in your pantry during the week, or a candy dish on the counter during the week? Can you just casually go by and grab 2 or 3 jelly beans and then go about your day? Or do you find yourself eating the entire bowl, eating the entire package of cookies, that kind of thing? Most people, yeah. And so they say, so what's the trick you use? Is you say,
12. I'm a big boy.
Yeah. So what you do is you say, oh, I just don't keep that stuff in the house until cheat day. And then I know I can eat the whole thing if I want, because it's cheat day, but you don't have that control around it. And so that is a good indicator that there is actually something amiss there with your relationship with food, because it has that control over you if you don't keep it in the house. And that making peace with food is a really cool thing, because once you do that, it's really interesting, because I used to be exactly that way. I couldn't keep that stuff in the house because I'd eat it all in one sitting. And but now I have candy, I have chips, I have whatever in the pantry, and I might eat some, I might not. I might eat part of something, not necessarily the whole thing, that kind of thing. I eat something usually sweet every day, but not a huge amount. Just I eat an amount that's satisfying, and I go about my day. And
Nice.
I haven't gained weight in, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years. I don't know. I don't really weigh myself, but yeah. So it's, you get to this place where you just naturally kind of navigate those eating experiences.
Love it. Thank you. Give us another tip, and then we're gonna. We've already been talking for an hour. Give us another tip.
Wow.
We'll kind of.
Yeah. Well, I'll just wrap up with the last couple of principles here. There's, one of the other ones is we kind of talked about the main ones there, but respecting your body. I mean, that's really what it's all about. That's one of the other principles, that we're doing all of this out of respect for our body. And then one of the other principles too is honor your health with the gentle nutrition. So we don't toss out the nutrition science. We don't toss out our understanding of the importance of fiber and vitamin C and all of that. But that's actually the last principle for a reason, because we work on these other things and set up this framework, and then we start to incorporate the nutrition part based on our unique needs. So some people who may have a history of eating disorders may have to be super gentle with that, the nutrition part. Myself, I don't have that history. I had a really good relationship with food growing up. And so I incorporate a lot of performance nutrition things into mine. I do ninja training. And so I drink a protein shake at a certain time, and I try and eat my, I work in those different performance nutrition kinds of things, supplementing with creatine monohydrate and, things like that, that for me, I understand how that works. For me, that's gentle nutrition. For another person, that might be excessive. And so they may not do that. And so it's important that we understand that intuitive eating is not just all about the feels and stuff, but it is bringing in that nutrition. But we don't start there. Like dieting tends to start there. Here we bring it in after we've established this framework. And then one of the other cool ones that I really like is it's reframing physical activity and exercise as movement. So a lot of people have this distaste for exercise. It was all about burning calories when they're dieting. It was like they go to the gym to burn off calories. They go to the gym to burn off the muffin that they're going to have afterward, or to burn off. So everything is all about burning off what you're eating, all the bad food. And you see the discussions in the fitness groups. What exercise is going to burn the most calories? Is it HIIT? Is it LISS? Is it weight training? And then they argue about it back and forth. And when in reality, if we just find some kind of physical activity that we enjoy and focus on that, then that is really what's going to be best for us. And the research actually supports that very strongly, that it's just moving your body physically will give you a lot of that low hanging fruit benefits there with your health and that kind of thing.
Beautiful.
Dude, what a powerful hour. Like, I mean, I can't even believe we've already been going 56 minutes. I have so many other different questions in my head. I'd love to have you come back on the show so we can continue this conversation and expand this, because I think it's been very fruitful for us, for myself, and definitely to be able to have this. Mary Kay, any final questions for Mr. Jeff?
I think in your brain? a little more about movement. So like walking, is walking an okay thing to do if it feels right for
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, it's probably, and the main benefits that you get from physical activity are going to come from just doing that small amount. All the other stuff. Yes. Are there specific benefits like bone health and some other things of doing strength training, having a higher level of muscle mass as you start getting older and it starts decreasing? Well, yeah, or if you get sick and you have a higher level of muscle mass, you're probably going to fare better because you're going to lose some of it, all those kinds of things. But the main stuff that most people can focus on is if you just get moving more. And again, it depends on the person where they're at. But if you're completely sedentary, just getting up and moving more is going to give you a host of benefits. You don't have to go big at the gym. You don't have to start trying to go 6 days a week and doing these crazy sweaty workouts and all of that stuff. And something really interesting, there was a research paper that came out just this last year, I think, or maybe the year before. But anyway, they found that physical activity can help people with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, reducing the liver fat apart from changes in their body weight. So just moving, just doing the physical activity, not losing any weight, and you can reduce your liver fat by doing that. And it's not excessive, like crazy workouts. It's just being more physically active. And so there's so many things that you can do from this, again, this weight neutral approach where we're not focusing on trying to get smaller, but we're focusing on all these health promoting behaviors.
Thank you. Awesome.
Jeff, I love it. And to that point, I love my Apple Watch. I mean, I'm not endorsing Apple Watches, but I love the fact that it gives me my stand goal, my movement goal, my exercise. So I get little rings that pop up and it's, you've created all your rings. So I've known I've stayed active. I've done my standing goal. So for me, that's kind of like, I love that at the end of the day, seeing all my little rings blow up. Whoever I'm with, I'm like, look, I got all my rings that are blew up. So I love that little reminder. But Jeff, where can people get a hold of you to continue this fascinating and informative and educational conversation?
Yeah. Well, I'm most active on Instagram at intuitive.eating.men. And then you can find my website at hopedrivesme.com. And I actually do free initial consultations if anybody is interested. And it's not just a 15-minute call. It's an hour long free call. Most people sign up. So, hey, it works. But yeah, so those are the places that you can find me. And then my podcast, Men's Intuition Podcast. And I have episodes there where I go through these different principles in much more detail. I'm just wrapping up actually production of a 13-lesson course on intuitive eating. It's a video-based course that can walk you through this whole process with supporting activities to really help you to develop those skills and that framework too. So yeah, we covered it in an hour, and yeah, there's a lot more to it, but
yeah, no, I encourage everyone listening to this or watching it on the replay, whatever, connect with Jeff. I mean, this is the important stuff about life. I mean, we take it for granted. It's pretty incredible what situations we can find ourselves in. I know a lot of people my age who once upon a time were all healthy and in great shape, and then unfortunately they made some different decisions, and now they're in a spot where they're pre-diabetic, they're diabetic, and they're on 17 different medications. It's scary. So we got to definitely take care of our health. Jeff, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to put you backstage here for a second.
Sounds great. Thank you.
With you. And Mary Kay and I are going to close out the show. So thank you again, brother, for being here. Boom. There we have it, Mary Kay. I just want to reiterate this for the people on the podcast. So hopedrivesme.com, HOPEDRIVESME.com. And then you can find them on Instagram at intuitive.eating.men, MEN. And then, of course, his podcast is hopedrivesme.com/podcast. Just type in Jeff Ash and you would find it as well. So, Mary Kay, what are some thoughts for you from this discussion? What kind of things and bells and whistles went off in your head when you're thinking about your own health and welfare?
I think bells and whistles for me, having lived 5 decades, right? Mid-50s, like as you are. Diet, this diet and that diet and that diet. Jeff's approach seems to be very lifestyle. It's more of a lifestyle. The rules are not this rigid thing that you're going to have to kick yourself if you don't quite stick to it. Right. It's a lifestyle, and it sounds like it's agile and fluid, so it could change depending on all those areas of your life as you keep assessing them down the road. So that's what I got out of it, and I'm actually pretty excited to look into his website and his podcast.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for being a wonderful, awesome co-host. I enjoyed having you in the frame versus Scott. No offense, Scott, but you're way more beautiful than Scott. So thank you for partnering with me on this particular episode. And again, your podcast with Scott Jones, what's the name of it again?
The Life Between All or Nothing. It's Thursdays at 7 p.m. EST. Eastern Standard Time.
And give everybody a brief glimpse of what it's about.
So what it's about is people being stuck in their lives. A lot of people are stuck and they're not quite sure how to make changes. And a lot of people think that making changes in your life is a big step, right? The all big kapow thing. But it's not. Even if you do want to make a gigantic change, it's going to take a bunch of small steps in between. And that's what we talk about, the life between all or nothing.
I love it. Thursday nights at what time?
Oh, you froze for a second.
Oh, Thursday nights at what time?
Oh, Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Awesome. Go check it out, ladies and gentlemen. Mary Kay is an awesome soul. She's a dear friend of mine, a sister of mine. And we got Joe in the house. He says, LOL, I'm working as you talk. He also says here, that's great. Thank you. And then Joe also says here, great segment, folks. Need to run, issues with the line. So he's working. So he had to go take care of the line. Mr. Ron says, thank you for an amazing hour, Jeff, Chris, and Mary. Anya says, amazing episode. Thank you, beautiful people, whether you're watching live or on the replay. Thank you so much. As always, for us, we would ask you to go to www.theunfilteredexperience.com, theunfilteredexperience.com. Go there and please join our Facebook community. Subscribe to the podcast. You can subscribe on Apple iTunes. You can find it on Spotify, anywhere you get podcasts, but most predominantly it's iTunes. So we have the link there on the unfilteredexperience.com. Go there, join the Facebook community. Let us know what types of topics, what types of guests you would like us to have. This is our show. This is your show. So we want to make it customized to you. And like Scott and I have said, in case you have missed it, coming up here in May, we're going to relaunch the show in much of a different way. Instead of just doing episode after episode, now we're going to do seasons of the episodes. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a big subject and then we're going to break it down and have guest speakers kind of talk about that subject. So we might talk about, mindset, and then under that, excuses and emotions. And we might talk about spirituality and the difference between religion and spirituality and all these different things. So we're going to be bringing that to you. So let us know what types of big segments you would like to see on that. I'd like to see you guys do an expose on this or that. Let us know what that is, because we want to customize it for you guys so that every time you come here every Friday night at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or when you listen to us on podcast, you get massive value for your buck, if you will, your time and your energy. And we just appreciate you guys so much for being here. For me, Mary Kay, it really comes down to, I love the fact that he talks about that intuitive eating, because as a life coach, as somebody who's been a mindset coach for so many years now, I've helped people in that specific area. And I've seen it in my own life with people I've dated, having challenges with that. And it is, you go on a diet and it's like, okay, immediately you got a negative connotation with it.
Yeah.
For me, I call it a healthy eating plan. And so I've constructed my life in such a way where I go through ebbs and flows. Like summertime, I usually lean out before summertime, and then summertime, it's like hamburgers and hot dogs, and within reason, moderation, but I enjoy myself. And I think there's really something to that, without going into and starving yourself and being miserable, saying, oh, I can't have that. I can't have that. I can't have that. What does that do for our mindset? But when you're able to have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, you're able to apply, a lot of the principles that Jeff talked about, and also the strategies in life. Which just one of the best things I've ever done is just like take a bite, put the fork down, take a drink of whatever I'm drinking, have a conversation, and then eat my meal that way. And I usually find that if I didn't do that, I would scarf down the whole meal and not have my stomach receptors and those hormones tell me that, hey, dumbass, you're full. And then I have leftovers for the next day. So it's like a 2-for-1 kind of thing, but to each his own. But out there, guys, we just implore upon you, take better care of your health. I mean, there's so many facets of this life that we get into. And when we start making better decisions that honor our body, that honor ourselves, that tell ourselves that we love ourselves, it's pretty incredible. It's what some dynamics in your brain will open up to and see possibilities in other areas of your life. But if you don't think that you're worthy enough to take better care of yourself, or, one of the biggest excuses I hear as the no excuses coach is like, Chris, I can't afford it. And so I asked him, I said, okay, relatively speaking, yes, it is more expensive, but the long-standing goal of this is, do you have time later on in life to go to the doctor's appointments? Do you have time later in life to take 15 different medications? Do you have time later in life to work your ass off to spend money to buy those medications that are only going to treat the symptom of the cause rather than the root of the cause? So what I do with my clients is we get that mental mindset to sit there and say, okay, listen, much like Jeff's saying, you can enjoy it, but go out there and do the work that you need to do, and be, careful with your choices so that ultimately you don't have those regrets later on in life. And that's what we want to avoid, ladies and gentlemen. We don't want you to get to the end of your life and look back and go, wow, all I had to do was eat cabbage and celery and kale and healthy fruits and vegetables and some avocado and things of that nature. I'll tell you this, Mary Kay. Just the other day, I had a conversation with somebody, and they were talking about they can't afford it and all this other stuff, giving me all sorts of excuses. And I said, if you got cancer tomorrow, I said, studies show that you can do. We had Rob Pryor on my Raw and Unscripted show. He wrote a book about how to cure cancer with just different eating. And so I've talked to so many different people like that have done that. They go, oh, I got cancer diagnosis, and I like our friend Heath. When he got his cancer diagnosis in his 20s, he started juicing and doing all these different things and alkalizing his body and Now that's the way he lives. But I sat there and I said, why isn't that we don't do that before we get the diagnosis? And that person was just like, wow. I said, so if you got cancer tomorrow, would you all of a sudden go, hey, I got to juice. Hey, I got to eat kale. Hey, I got to do whatever I got to do. And the person said, yeah. I'm like, so why not do it now? Why not do it now, ladies and gentlemen? Don't get to that spot where you're going to be regretting what it is that you're putting in your mouth. And I think of that for myself, ladies and gentlemen. So the fingers are pointing back at me. We love you guys. Next Friday, join us for another special episode while Scott is off playing with tigers in Tanzania. Next week, we have my dear friend, Patricia Goyette. She's going to be here, and we have a special mystery guest. I'm not sure exactly who it might be, but be here next Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Let us know how we can serve you, and go out there and have an amazing week. We appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for being here, and we will see you here next time on the Unfiltered Experience. Cheers. Thank you, Mary Kay.